I'm Saundra Kelley, and I am reading from On the Drop Side of Yonder by Jacqueline Brunais. The title of this chapter is Bats and Birds. Are you afraid of anything? Why are some people afraid of things that 99% of the rest of the world considers harmless? With some, it's spiders or snakes or even worms. I am afraid of birds. All kinds of birds. From canaries, parakeets, wrens and robins, to chickens, turkeys, emus, and ostriches. Those are my big, irrational, lifelong fears, even though I have never had a negative or terrifying experience with the creatures, well, except for one. Once I was chased by a testy rooster, and then a big black turkey with fanned tail feathers. Oh, yeah. I wonder why people have phobias like this. I can't explain it unless we've lived previous lives and had a bad experience with a similar creature. My mother said I was a little taught when I was shown some baby chicks in a box. It was behind one of those big old ranges farmhouses had in their kitchens. I went bonkers when I saw it, she said. Sometimes my mother brought chickens live, and during hunting season my dad and brother shot pheasants. I can still remember the horrid smell of wet feathers as the birds were scalded and picked. I don't know if that had anything to do with my fear of feathered creatures, but I know it turns my stomach, even to think about it. I swore to myself that I would never pluck a chicken unless I was starving to death. Bats have always scared me. When I was young, our house was somewhat isolated, and therefore our yard was totally dark at night. A few 100 feet down the road in both directions were street lights, so bats by the dozens swooped back and forth hunting for bugs, or so I was told. I swear they were diving at me when I had to run under the lights to get to my house. I was terrified and breathless by the time I got there. It is a fact that birds and chickens singled me out. I recall going with my mother to a farm outside Gregory. As we were walking to the house, a huge black turkey began to chase after me. My mother, who was ahead of me, and hearing my shrieks, turned around and saw the turkey and chased it away. One summer, my family was visiting at my grandparents' farm near Onaway, and my brother and I were allowed to go into the woods to round up the cows and drive them back to the barn for milking. We felt very important until one afternoon on the way back. A flock of swallows began diving at me. They ignored my brother. Again I was terrified, and after that, I didn't dare go after the cows again. When I was about 12 years old, I'd gone to bed at the house in my room upstairs. I read for a few minutes, and then I turned out the light. But before I went to sleep, I heard an unfamiliar noise. A soft swish, bump, bump noise, which stopped for a few seconds and then started up again. What could it be? The noise stopped and started and seemed to be coming from different parts of my room. It was a bat! Frightened, I covered up my head in a panic. I'd heard of bats getting into people's attics and into the main part of the house. I thought I would smother with my head under the covers, but I didn't dare get out of the bed. At last I went to sleep, and I slept until daylight. And then, when I cautiously peeked my head out of the covers, to my relief, I saw a balloon bouncing across the floor. It was propelled by the breeze coming in my open screened window, and it made the exact noise of my imagined bat. I don't even like dry feathers. One of my daughters bought me a feather duster, but I couldn't bring myself to use it. It's also difficult for me to look at pictures of vultures, hawks, and eagles, as well as caged live birds. They look so menacing. I do, however, love to see them soaring in the sky. I was outraged when in 2005, then Michigan Governor Jennifer Granholm signed a bill allowing the shooting of mourning doves for sport. I was annoyed that politicians would consider any kind of statewide open season on these gentle birds. Some people hate their eerie call. My granddaughter Lara, then 7 years old, was spooked by it and ran into the house when she heard the mourning dove's call. I suspect it's the word mourning suggesting death and ghosts and goblins to her. I love the sound of their call. Elle, my husband, was late getting the storm windows off and the screens up on the windows, and this was due to a cold spring we had the year the bill was signed. Once the screens were in, I could hear the doves clearly, especially when waking and deciding whether to get up lazily or go back to sleep. The sound transports me back to an earlier time. Sometimes I slept on a cot on our screened front porch when I was a child, and I woke to their cooing. I think I thought the bird was a mourning, not mourning dove. School was out, and being allowed to sleep on the front porch confirmed that summer had really arrived. We sat on the cot during the day, using it as a sofa, but at night it opened into a semblance of a double bed. I remember lying there first with my older sister Arlene, and later with my brother Elwin. We could talk and laugh as much as we wanted to before we went to sleep. As darkness gradually descended, the owls, and who knows what other creatures, began to hoot or otherwise make their presence known. We tried to scare each other by identifying a given sound as that of a bear or a wolf, or perhaps a gypsy come to carry us off. The temptation to flee to our beds in the house was compelling. But if my brother gave in and I stayed, I had to tremble alone until I went to sleep. When my dad closed the front door, I felt as solitary as Tarzan in the jungle. The songbirds began early, but it's the mourning doves that stimulate my memories of home. I thought, if the word was mourning dove, how completely logical that would be. Their call had such a beautiful, soft, mourning sound to it. Awakening to their gentle cooing, the blankets deliciously damp and cool from moisture in the air was comforting. And while I might have gone to sleep outside of my covers, always I woke up snugly tucked in under them. From there I could watch leaves in the 2 giant poplar trees in the front yard as they fluttered and shone, as the waking sun and the fresh breeze stirred in them. A few chores and I could swing and daydream without ever having to hurry or get ready for school. I could hear my mother preparing Dad's breakfast, smell the coffee, the eggs, and the toast, and then my dad would leave for work, walking, of course. At the noon table, he might laughingly comment on seeing me earlier in the day, huddled into a ball against the coolness of the morning. It seemed Dad rarely noticed me, and so to hear him chuckle at the sight of me sleeping was flattering. So when the mourning dove hunting issue hit the news in 2005, my reaction was, hunters and politicians leave those birds alone. How odd it is that I love watching and learning about birds from a distance. I keep a finch feeder stocked with thistle and suet cakes for the woodpeckers outside my dining room window. Some years I maintain a regular feeder, but recently the numbers of starlings and sparrows were so great my back steps were a mess, so I did not hang up one after that. I have a collection of bird books, and I pore over them, especially when I see an unusual bird. One of the thrills of my life came when I was in a park in Pennsylvania, and I heard the oddest of calls. First, a note, a much lower one, and then a high one, coming from a bird which, from a distance and through my binoculars, reminded me of a robin. I memorized the call and hastened to my bird book in our motor home, and in it I found a description of a bird that looked like the one I'd seen. Its call was described as singing, "Drink your tea." It was the first and only time I ever saw a rufous-sided towhee. Another time I was hanging out clothes at my dad's place in Livingston County, and I heard a sound. Looked up, and I saw the most beautiful rose-breasted grosbeak. He stayed in the tree for a long time, and it lifted my spirits for the entire day. There's something crazy about loving birds in their natural habitat, the panicking if a little parakeet flies around the room. I can't explain it, but perhaps this poem, Bird Phobia, can say it for me. Bird phobia. Fragments of a prior life haunt me. Was an eagle or hawk sent to daunt me? How else to explain sweats and chills and mouth dry as feathers when an untethered bird flaps my way? I am the prey, and this may be the day I'll be torn by the beak of a raptor and launched into the hereafter. The phobia is irrational, no pathogenesis. It's like fear of heights, some people's nemesis. And some turn pale from dread of snakes. But my fear hinges on the absurd. How embarrassing to suffer the shakes in the presence of a minuscule bird. Terror defies logic and passage of time. Baby chicks, cuddly fuzzies, ever so quaint. And yet I, a small child, became faint at the sight and fled, quaking and hyperventilating. Winged creatures seem to sense fear, and I'm singled out by dive-bombing swallows and red-winged blackbirds in swampy hollows. Nesting robins spy me and shriek as if I would ever dare peck at their nests. I've been pursued by turkeys and a cranky rooster and hissed at by nasty, arrogant goose, all heaping upon me uncalled for abuse. I've tried to overcome this neurosis, but progress is slow and unsure the prognosis. A friend I trust holds a tame bird still. A tentative finger I extend in goodwill. Wary we stare, the primordial beak and glassy eye seem predatory, not meek. A touch, how soft. Surely this handful of down bodes no ill will. I vow not to break down. Trying to observe it from the bird's perspective. I can afford to be circumspective. A 4-ounce creature has to feel some fear with a 180-pound trembling neurotic so near. I'll keep at the quest of wresting power from my primal fear. I vow not to cower, for the next flutter of wings I hear in the gloam may be those of an angel come to guide me home. Then she wrote this lovely piece called Mourning Doves. Who will mourn for the mourning doves, the gentle birds that strum the soul's strings? Not the hardy gunslingers who lust for the sight of blood. And then she wrote a haiku. Wild, ghoulish laughter rouses the slumbering lake. A loon greets the dawn. and on condor wings. In dreams I soar on condor wings above the earth, my soul in rhythm with the breath of God. There are 14 chapters in On the Drop Side of Yonder, written by Jacqueline Brunais. 13 more you can hear like this.